Hello, everybody, and welcome to Finding the Faith. Every Tuesday at 9. Oh my god. Are we live? Tell me in the chat if we're live. And if everybody just saw me get the show time wrong.
No, it was correct time, but for in England.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. We're live.
I have
Thank
no
you
idea
so
if the time zone works out that way, but I'm just going to run with it.
Thank you so much, everybody, for standing by. But we are here. We are back. We have Clay, and this is Finding the Faith, where there's usually less technical difficulties. But I can promise that every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, we explore what matters. Okay, I see signs of life in the chat. Okay, so for some channels that were working, some channels weren't. I hope we're all good on all of them, but for those that didn't get to hear, would you like to recount your first memories of religion?
Yeah, it was going to church with my dad and like also going to Protestant churches with my mom here and there. Didn't go with my mom a lot because uh she would get sick, but
Mhm.
yeah, so I mostly went with my dad.
Nice. Was there a was your upbringing like very Catholic, or was it more balanced between the two faiths, just out of curiosity?
Um so I went with my dad on Sundays, and I would see oh, my mom never went, so sometimes I would just like to stay home. And then my mom, when she could, she would go to church. And because my dad went to the 8 a.m. mass, it was always a little bit easier just to go with my mom when she would go,
Mhm.
because it would be later on in the morning.
Mhm.
Um, and then occasionally I'd go to some youth groups here and there. I remember doing that, but I never ever went for very long, like when I was elementary school age. So yeah, I was in an awkward place where I was too Catholic for the Protestants and I was
Mhm.
too Protestant for the Catholics. So
Yeah, I when I came back to my faith initially, that's kind of how it was for me, because I should have, but I didn't realize what a difference there was in like the liturgical calendar. So I'd be wishing like different, holy event days
mhm.
in the Catholic Church to my non-denominational Protestant friends, and they're like, "What are you talking about, Frida?" And I'm like, "Danielle Bean said, okay, do you not listen to the Girlfriends podcast? Like, I have it on good authority that that's what today is." Just saying thank you. And they're like so confused, and I'm so confused because I'm like breaking back into my faith, and it was a whole thing. But yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I was that way all throughout elementary school. I remember specifically sixth or seventh grade. My dad was like, "You're going to start ushering at the Catholic Church," and I'm
Mhm.
just like, "Okay." And I remember he had me in faith formation classes going through um when I was in middle school. So I remember being 11 or 12 or whatever, and uh you know doing first communion, my first confession, and stuff like that. And he had me going to those classes. And at that point I was also going to a Protestant youth group on Wednesdays.
Okay.
And one was very fun and the other one was like being in school. And the I hated going to the Catholic faith formation classes. I just absolutely hated it. Another reason why I really hated it is
Mhm.
nobody took it seriously. Like, I was
Yeah.
here and I was um I would go to those classes and I felt I was the only one culturally in any way, shape, or form Christian. Like, I'd be
Mhm.
like, "Does anybody else here listen to DC Talk?" And everybody would be like, "No, we listen to Eminem." And I'm like, "But you're supposed to be Christian." Like, what?
Yeah, I can definitely see how the cognitive dissonance would be really tricky there. And especially too with kind of balancing both of them and one of them being like you being the only one taking it seriously when you were exploring that.
Yeah, and then I'd go to the Protestant youth group and I'd be like, "Does anybody here listen to DC Talk?" And it's like, "Oh yeah, dude, here, you gotta check out Toby Mac's latest album. You gotta check out like a bunch of bands that you actually know that are like tangentially related." And it's like, "Oh, these are my people." So there was definitely a more cultural aspect to it too, of like there were so many cultural Catholics, and when
Yeah,
that's not a good term if people
no.
don't know.
That's a big thing in New England too, like especially everybody's just sort of some sort of like Irish Catholic, but they're more like it's more part of like a random part of like their DNA than it
Yeah,
is their
yeah.
expressed behavior.
I'm in the American Southwest. I'm in California, and so it's Mexicans for us. Not so much Irish Catholics, more Mexicans.
Yeah, we don't like
So
the sun.
yeah.
I'm kidding, but I mean, one time my dermatologist was like, "You have to wear sunscreen everywhere," and I was like, "What if I literally don't go outside?" They're like, "Everywhere," and I'm like, "I'm putting sunscreen on in my house to be in my house," and this was like it was right around COVID too, which is why I was like, "This is ridiculous." But then I ended up getting sick, and I didn't end up having COVID, but the way like the light filtering blinds were, I literally got a sunburn in my own bed. And I was like, you know what? Maybe I should reconsider that sunscreen option.
No, I'm a mutt. I'm various British Isles on my dad's side, and my mom's Asian and Mexican and Spanish. So I have like on one hand I can't handle the sun, and
Mhm.
on the other hand I very much can. So yeah.
Yeah. You know the one thing that helps me be able to handle the sun coming in earlier every morning? It's this
Coffee.
awesome. Yeah, it is coffee. Want a delicious brew that shares your values too? Look no further than North Arrow Coffee. North Arrow Coffee is a pro life veteran owned business I am proud to have as a sponsor. Not only do they have a delicious, superior product, they also pledge to donate at least 15% of their sales to organizations that support and advocate for the preborn, help families facing crisis pregnancies, and offer healing to those who have been affected by abortion in a gospel centered way. Order North Arrow Coffee today. You can do so by going to northarrowcoffee.co. And when you use code FRIDA, FREDA, you'll save 10% off your first order. And with daylight savings time, this is a solid reminder, just real quick, for all the pet owners. If your cats are randomly screaming, it's probably because you didn't reset their automatic feeder. So just a loving PSA because we had to do that today. We're like, wait, why is he getting upset? It's like, oh, he doesn't know the time changed. Silly
Yeah,
cat.
my cat just bugs us when he's hungry. So, and he goes and hunts outside too.
Mhm.
So sometimes he's just like, "Food? I'm not hungry. I just ate a gopher. What are you talking about?"
That's amazing. Yeah. Just so you guys know, every donation, every Rumble rant or buy me a coffee or Venmo gets Jazz a treat. So if you would like to have him have snack time, you're more than welcome. But moving on, how did the ordinate come into being?
Yeah. Okay, so it's the ordinariate.
Oh, the ordinariate. Thank you.
Yes, and so typically a ordinariate, and I know Margot's probably going to fact check me in real time if I get any of this wrong. Um,
No pressure.
yeah, so an ordinariate is usually a subsection of a church um that is like for the army, navy, and stuff like where they can funnel priests to go and serve in different needs. So there's like I said, an ordinariates for the military.
Okay.
And then so basically what happened is in the 1970s,
Mhm.
um, some Anglican priests were being like, "Hey, we don't like how the Church of England is becoming more and more liberal.
Mhm.
So, like, let's go and rejoin the Catholic Church because they still know what they're about."
Mhm.
Um, and actually, one of the priests at my church was the specific priest to hand the petition into the Vatican.
Wow.
And I think to the Pope directly.
Wow.
Um, for the Catholic Church to start taking in Anglican and Episcopal priests. And so that happened. And in the 1980s, this happened in 1979. And in the
Mhm.
1980s, what happened was um, the Catholic Church was noticing a problem because they were like, okay, we're accepting all these Anglican priests, and uh, they celebrate a different kind of mass
Mhm.
when they show up. It's still valid, but it's different than your standard Novus Ordo mass.
Mhm.
And like the congregation's a little confused and the bishop is sometimes confused and but okay, well, these are isolated cases. I think we can deal with it.
Mhm.
And then it started to grow, and then large numbers, like it got to the point in the mid 2000s where whole church communities, like you had bishops,
Mhm.
like Anglican bishops coming up with like priests under them, and basically and of course all of those people in the church
Yeah.
coming with all of them, and they basically went to the Vatican and they said, um hey, we want to join the Catholic Church.
Mhm.
And the uh the Catholic Church is like, crap. It was fine when it was one or two priests here and there. We just like, because Anglican priests and Episcopal priests are allowed to get married, it
Mhm.
was like, oh, a couple married priests would show up,
Mhm.
they'd ask to join, we'd give them the dispensations, it'd be fine. But now we have like entire church communities, and we can't just take all of these people and tell them to be Catholic and leave all their traditions behind. So what happened was is they said, you know what, we're going to allow you to come in and basically give us all of your traditions and the way you do things, and we're going to look them over, see what's listed, see what isn't, throw out everything that's not listed, and you can just bring everything else in. Um,
That's fascinating.
yeah, so there's three Anglican ordinariates. I don't remember the names,
Mhm.
but there's one for England, and that that's one ordinariate. There is another one in Australia because it was Australian, um, English, and American Anglican Episcopal priests going um, to the Catholic Church when this happened. Um, so this was in the mid 2000s when this was all taking place. Just looking at the chat, when
Yeah.
and it was basically in the whole Anglosphere. So
Okay.
anywhere the Church of England has reach. So uh, yeah, the Catholic Church came, and there was one set up specifically for England, one set up for Australia, and one set up for America. And the one in America is called uh, the Personal Ordinariate for the Chair of St. Peter.
Cool.
And it's not a Latin mass, it's called the Divine Worship.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of people like to call it a Latin mass in English because that's what it looks like, kind of, but
Mhm.
it's not. They're different rites. Um, but everything is just so small right now
Mhm.
that it's not going to, like, it's probably going to be probably 100 years before they get segmented to their own thing. But right now it's still very, very small.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and it officially started in 2012, And the priest that I have at my church, who runs the church, was the first ordinariate priest in the state of California.
That's so cool.
Yeah, yeah, he's very traditional and very based, and it was funny just because of all the Novus Ordo versus traditional Latin
Mhm.
Mass stuff. I was talking to a friend of mine who shall remain nameless because they are kind of a big deal, kind of. Um, and he was telling me I told him I was joining the Ordinariate, and he was like, "Oh man, if they end up like completely getting rid of the Latin Mass, I'm sure we're all going to end up joining the Ordinariate." Because there's still that traditionalism
Mhm.
there. And like there's another podcast host I like to listen to, Matt Fradd, and one of the things he constantly says is don't demand conformity where the church allows for diversity.
Mhm.
And the ordinariate coming into the Western Catholic Church is definitely one of those cases.
That's really fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing the history of that. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. I know you've never heard of Matt Fradd, Margot. I know you live under a rock, especially when it comes to Catholic things. You just completely live under a rock.
It's funny because I actually haven't.
So imagine Catholic Joe Rogan. It's probably the best way to.
That's lit.
That that's that's what Pints with Aquinas is. That's what Matt Fradd's show is. The
Okay.
Norbertines are great, and in fact, the majority of our priests that aren't Father Bardas are from a Norbertine abbey that's in Orange County, just over the hill here. So,
Could you share with us what the differentiation of that is? Or like what exactly that means for those of us not in the know?
so within the Catholic Church, you have a series of different monastic traditions,
Hmm.
and so they're just one of those
Oh,
traditions. So like you have the Norbertines, you have Franciscans, you have the
okay.
Jesuits.
Hmm.
Um, so they're just a different one of those traditions.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Yeah,
In New England, I feel like it's very Franciscan heavy.
yeah.
Um, so how does it differ from the no? I'm gonna do my absolute best to pronounce these things correctly, but How does it differ from the Novus Ordo?
Um, so a Novus Ordo is so they're both done in English. The
Okay.
Novus Ordo is done in the vernacular, so all around the world. It's done whatever language they speak it in.
Mhm.
The Divine Worship Mass is done in High English, so it's these and thous and like more King James Bible speak.
Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah, and but then they also will offer a high sung mass, and that is like a 50-50 split between English and Latin.
Okay.
So the Ordinariate Mass also is, I believe it's called ad orientem. So the priest, like where they have the altar set up,
Mhm.
the priest is facing east instead of facing the congregation,
Okay.
and it is still in the it's more similar to a Latin mass, to where like the priest is facing the altar,
Mhm.
and only turns around on certain points, and it's very structured, but it's not as long as a traditional Latin mass.
Okay. I've always wanted to go to a traditional Latin mass, and my biggest issue with potentially trying to go to one around here is that I don't speak Latin. I learned Latin freshman year of high school, but I don't speak it.
You're probably more ahead of like a lot of people who would go to a Latin mass. Like yes, the readings are in English. Even at the Latin mass, the high sung Latin masses, the readings are in English. It's like a 50-50 split between English and Latin. Um, but yeah, like the way a lot of people get through a Latin mass, I've been to one low Latin mass,
Mhm.
and they have like little red books that are help guide you through, and it has everything. And on one side it has the English, and on the other side it has the Latin. And
Okay.
yeah, even in the missals that we have for the ordinariate,
Mhm.
divine worship mass, it's the same thing. Like one side is in Latin and the other side is in English. And honestly, that's how I was able to go to a Latin mass and
That makes sense.
understand what was going on, because I had so much practice like going through the ordinariate's missal.
Mhm.
So
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
yeah.
I really love that. I That makes me feel a lot better about going.
Yeah, the it's probably going to be a bit harder to find a ordinariate
Mhm.
church, because like I said, it's a lot smaller.
Yeah.
Um I'm lucky, there's like 3 of them here in Southern California, but there's
Spoiled.
yeah, but there's like entire states that don't have one. So
I'm
it
just teasing. You fully deserve to be spoiled. You're a great guy.
yeah. Well, I mean, I am in California, and where where the degenerates are is where the most outreach needs to happen. Um,
True.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's I am very blessed that way. Although I have like 3 ordinariates within driving distance. I think the closest high Latin mass is
Mhm.
like 2 hours away from me or something like that. So
Okay. What's the difference between a high and a low mass?
so a high mass is um going to be a lot longer. There's more prayers said. Um it's where a low mass is a lot shorter. The prayers are different. Um like I said, I haven't been to a high Latin mass,
Mhm.
so I can't tell you like all the intricacies of the ins and outs of
That makes
everything.
sense. I was
Yeah.
just wondering if it was like if one was like a happy thing and one was like a more, somber kind of thing
No, no,
or
it's more like prayers that are said, and what the congregation is supposed to be doing during those times. So,
okay, that makes sense. I
yeah.
appreciate that.
The low masses are just a little bit easier on everybody to get through. So like the closest Latin mass I have is always going to be it's always a low mass. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So in chat, Makisi Christiana, I apologize if I pronounced that incorrectly, says High Mass is sung, High Mass has smells and bells.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, so we have the ordinariate does have high mass. I should have known that. Um because in the ordinariate we have a high divine worship and a low divine worship.
Mhm,
And yeah, at the high mass, which is on Sundays, it has all the smells and bells. It has everything is sung. And on the low masses on the during the weekdays, everything's said, and it's a lot more condensed.
okay.
So yeah.
I think I actually attended a High Mass one time in Ireland over Zoom during COVID.
That's cool.
It was my cousin's church and she sent me the link because I have family over there. Um, so why do you attend the
Ordinariate.
ordinariate over other liturgies?
Uh, so technically I don't, because I still usher at the Novus Ordo I
Mhm,
grew up going to. Um, so typically my weekend looks like I wake up, I go to my Novus Ordo, and I usher
mhm,
there at 8, and then I come home and I eat breakfast, and then because I get home at like 9, so
mhm.
I'm able to meet the 1 hour fast before, um, and then I go to my ordinariate at 11. So I typically go to church like twice on Sundays, just because
Nice.
I like the ordinariate mass. I like the divine worship. It's a lot more beautiful. In my opinion, it's more
Mhm,
beautiful. It's definitely more reverent. Um, and it is definitely an older way of doing things. The divine worship actually comes from when England itself was
mhm,
getting evangelized to, like almost St. Patrick era, like
mhm.
400s and on.
Mhm.
and it was, I forget what the name of that mass was, but it was kind of like the Latin mass to go, version of things.
Okay.
Yeah, and so it's a little shorter, a little bit more condensed, but you're still bringing everything. So it's not, that's why it's not a true, um, traditional Latin mass. They change
Okay.
things around so, when you're on the frontier of doing things,
Mhm.
it's a little bit easier.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense, and thank you for breaking that down so I could more fully comprehend that. I do appreciate that.
You're welcome.
High mass is mass at high mass is mass at a higher altitude. Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that in chat.
Yeah, so Colorado has more high masses than we do in California.
It's all the math is mathing for me.
Yeah.
Now, what would you say your favorite thing about Protestantism is versus what is your favorite thing about Catholicism?
Uh, Protestants, for the most part, know their Bibles a lot better. Um, I am just going to lay that out. Like, I know a lot more Protestants who can name off chapter and verse and say, you know, this is, what the Bible says here, which I don't have that level of devotion to study. Even the books I do love and cite as resource material for like World War II stuff, I need to
Mhm,
put a bookmark in there. I need to know where to find it. Like, I know several Bible verses.
mhm,
I still need to find, like, type them into Google to know what they are chapter and verse. So that is definitely something that Protestants have going for a lot better, because it really does break down on how Catholics versus Protestants do
mhm,
church. So the best way to describe it is that Catholic worship
mhm,
is like equivalent to the temple worship in the Old Testament,
mhm.
and Protestant service
Mhm.
is equivalent to a synagogue.
Okay.
So
Okay.
when you go to so the old way of, like, this is very technical, and why Protestants don't technically worship is because in order to worship you need blood
Mhm,
sacrifice.
mhm,
And so if you look at the Old Testament on what sacrifice is, they're always bringing a lamb
mhm.
or, other animals
Yeah.
to be slaughtered. And that was to atone for sins. Um, and that's what we do at the Mass. We present the body and blood of Jesus Christ as the blood sacrifice, as the Passover lamb.
Mhm,
And uh, there are this is really the difference between high church Protestantism and low church Protestantism too.
mhm,
So even what I said earlier isn't entirely true, but it kind of is, because Catholics fully believe that Christ is the body and blood, where Protestants, even like Lutherans,
mhm,
um, and Anglicans, just see it as symbolic.
mhm,
Because so like even within Protestantism, you have high church and low church Protestantism. So
mhm.
high church is more akin to a Catholic mass, which is why
Okay.
the Anglicans were able to approach the Pope and say, um, we want to do, um, we want to join the Catholic Church. When they switched over, um, there, especially with the Ordinariate, it
Mhm,
was, we're bringing the way we do things,
mhm,
and it was deemed a valid mass after the church, approved everything. Versus like going to a Baptist church where it's a dude up on stage, holding a Bible and, saying, this is what the Word of God says. We're going to go through this book of the Bible today. So, um, because of that,
mhm.
there's high church, low church. High church more represents what a mass is, and low church is, um, like I said, uh, Bible study.
Mhm,
And then um you can really see the difference there of how one of them is more akin to temple worship and the other one is closer to synagogue.
yeah, for sure. That makes so much sense. I really, like that's a great metaphor for it. Like That's a great, sorry, simile.
Hmm.
Um, and that makes a lot of sense. In the chat, it says, oh, awesome. Asked and answered. Perfect. Um, so getting down to it too, what is your take on Sola Scriptura?
um, so Sola Scriptura is basically like it. It's literally Latin for Bible alone. So within
Mhm,
the Catholic Church, you have a triangle.
mhm,
At one point is the magisterium, at another point is tradition, and at
mhm,
the other point is the Bible. Um, so because of that, um, the proper place to be a Catholic is right in the center.
mhm.
Eastern Orthodox are more closely aligned between 2 points of tradition and, the Bible, and not dealing with the magisterium at all. So that's basically what makes Orthodox Orthodox. Um, and so Sola Scriptura is saying, no, we're not dealing with big T tradition.
Mhm.
We're not dealing with the magisterium. We are only dealing with the Bible. And so that's kind of where Sola Scriptura comes in. And um, I always had a problem with that, like
Yeah.
always, because it's like, okay, I like history.
Mhm.
When the Bible stops, the church didn't. The church
Yeah.
is a historical organization. And so when people tell me I'll get into arguments with Calvinists, or I'll see
Mhm.
Calvinists say like, no, this is the way things are. And it's like, my only problem with that is that the church didn't develop that way.
Yeah.
Um, like I don't care what your personal views are on, Jesus saying, telling Peter, "You are rock, and upon this rock I will build my church."
Mhm.
Like I don't care what your personal interpretations are of that. It's like, well, the church developed that way. So there was obviously some meaning there
Yeah.
that the early Christians knew that you are either refusing to acknowledge, are ignorant about,
Mhm.
or just flat out reject.
Yeah.
And if you reject it, I mean, fine, but just tell me you reject it. Don't come up with this convoluted
Yeah.
thing.
Stand on business, not a conspiracy.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like
Yeah.
I've met Protestants to where they're just like, I don't like the magisterium, I don't like the Pope. I like going to I like going to my Bible study church. And it's like, okay, like I can respect that.
Mhm.
But when you start saying like, well, the early church fathers didn't believe what you actually said they do, and it's like, we have their writings. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. Hang on one second.
Okay.
Oh no, you're doing the right. There we go. Somebody wants Jazz to have a snack time, but that makes a lot of sense. And I absolutely do agree that, I can totally be respectful of someone's beliefs, especially when they're upfront about their actual beliefs. Come here, you chunky boy. That's a great question, Hannah. How early were these early church fathers that we're talking about?
So, so one of my favorite early church fathers, like to bring up as a trump card, is Saint Ignatius of Antioch, and he is writing around the year 100. And this is important because John is still alive. Um, the Apostle John is on an island, like um in exile, and he's
Mhm.
still alive. So Saint Ignatius of Antioch is writing about the Eucharist, writing about being in communion with Rome, while at least one of the apostles is still alive. So some of these early church fathers are very early, and it's like, um you know some of them are, I think the early church period is like year 400, like between year 33 and year 400, somewhere in there. So while it's like, oh, you're 400 years removed, and it's like, well, if you were to look at, you know, America's very, very new, so I'm not
Mhm.
going to use America. But if
Yeah.
you're to look at England and you're looking at people writing about 100 years after a fact of
Mhm.
something happened, it's like, well, they're talking probably to their either grandparents or parents
Mhm.
about this thing that had happened.
Yeah,
Um, so like World War II was is 80 years ago. You know, my grandpa was a small kid. He still has memories of what it was like growing up in that period and
mhm.
immediately after. And talking to World War II vets. So when we
Yeah.
look at like 100 years as like, oh my gosh, like when you start practically looking into how
Mhm.
that 100 years is, it's like, oh, that's not that long ago, or something from the Civil War for us
Mhm.
Americans, and it's like, oh, I was talking to my grandpa, and my grandpa remembers talking to his grandpa about the Civil War,
Yeah.
or World War I, and it's like these. While 400 years seems like a long time, and it's like, especially in oral
Mhm.
traditions and oral customs, when
Mhm.
before people couldn't read, um, that information is preserved a lot longer.
Yeah,
So,
for sure. Also, my papa was in World War II. He fought in Guadalcanal.
oh wow,
Yeah.
yeah, that's ugh, that was a
Yeah.
fight. Um,
Yeah.
don't get me started on World War II. I will go on for hours. Um,
Someday we'll have to have a hangout and you and Kyle can
yeah.
go back and forth about it.
I actually just one last thing on the
Mhm.
Guadalcanal thing. The Marine Raiders who landed on Tulagi during that campaign
Mhm.
wore these jumpsuits, and those jumpsuits now are incredibly rare. And when they show up, they're hundreds of dollars. And I have one, and my ex-girlfriend bought one for while we were dating. She
Mhm.
bought it for me, not even knowing what it was, for $15. And she texted me and she's like, "I bought a jumpsuit and a military jacket. Do you want the jumpsuit? I'm keeping the jacket." I'm like, "No, no, I'm good." And she's like, "Okay, here's a picture of the jacket." And the jacket was from like Korea or Vietnam.
Mhm.
And so I thought the jumpsuit was
Yeah.
like a flight suit, and I'm like, "I don't want a flight suit." And then she was like, "Well, my brother didn't want it. So, here's a picture of me wearing the jumpsuit." And I saw it, I knew what it was, and I'm like, "Yes, yes, yes, I want it. I want it. I want it. I want it."
That's amazing. That's so, so cool.
Yeah, so it's sitting um in my drawer right now. One of my buddies was trying to get me to lend it to a museum that he was working at for a while, but I'm like, so
Yeah. I feel that. Everybody's getting really excited about World War II in the chat.
I will give an intersection of World War II and Catholicism to segue it back.
Yeah.
So, there was this mystic priest named
Mhm.
Padre Pio who lived in Italy.
Yeah, I heard of him.
Yeah, and he was a mystic, and he was known to bilocate. And what bilocation is, I'm sure PJ, because whole thing on bilocation, um, that it's basically being able to cast your presence and even possibly even your physical body to another location and be seen at the exact same time in the exact same place. Well, over during bombing missions over Italy,
Mhm.
uh, air crews reported seeing Padre Pio 30,000 feet up in the air, standing there, directing all of the bombers, "Don't bomb here, go that way." And there's only a couple official reports
Mhm.
because the people who filed them were then stripped of all flight duties and told, "You're not allowed to fly. You're seeing a guy standing in the middle of the sky." And so everybody shut up about seeing that.
Yeah.
But people would still like go into town, find this mystic priest, and they were like, "You were standing 30,000 feet in front of us telling us not to go this way." And he's like, "Yeah, I live here. I don't want you to bomb my city." And he's saying
Valid.
this all in Italian.
Mhm.
But like a bunch of Protestants like converted to Catholicism because they're like, dude, look, I don't know. I know what I was taught growing up, but when I'm flying 30,000 feet up in the air, I need to be on an oxygen mask. I need to be in this airplane. I need to have heavy flying equipment. And I see this monk in his robe just standing in the middle of the air telling us to go a different direction. I think something's more true than the
Yeah,
I can link you an article on that
that would be
later.
amazing.
Yeah.
I think you're also in our Discord too, so
Yeah.
you can share that under the resources tab. Um, so that makes sense as to how we get there. And honestly, Sola Scriptura has never quite sat right with me, just because if you're using the Bible as like a literary work, kind of when it comes to like your own interpretations and everything, I feel like you can get so off track versus when you're actually interpreting it, through.
No, I fully believe that you need a higher authority. I mean, even the
Mhm,
Bible says so. You have the Ethiopian eunuch in the book of Acts
mhm,
where it's like, "Hey, what are you reading?" "I'm reading the holy word." It's like, "Okay, do you know what it means?" And it's like, "How can I if I have nobody to tell me?"
yeah.
Um so oh boy, the chat's getting off topic on the Babylon Bee. I think I don't know if this originated from the Calvinism talk and just the fact that they're in Southern California, or you guys are referencing that I was in a video with them because of Abby Libby. Um,
Yeah, we'll get to
yeah, well, we can talk about that later.
yeah, there's some Twitter questions at the end that touch on that. So that totally makes sense as far as sola scriptura goes. Now, what are your thoughts on Reformation Day?
Um, personally, I think Reformation. Okay, the celebration. I want to
Mhm,
be very clear. The celebration of Reformation Day, I think, is a very bad thing,
mhm,
arguably even demonic. And the reason is that whether you're Protestant or Catholic, you shouldn't be celebrating any way of a separation or breaking up of a church, especially knowing how many ills that separation has caused.
yeah.
Like the whole 30 Years War, like the literally the
Mhm,
whole reason why we have the nation state system today is because of Catholics and Protestants fighting each other. The only reason it's the 30 Years' War went from a pure religious war to a political war is
mhm,
because France switched sides because it was like, hey, wait, we get to fight the Austrians. We have political reasons for fighting the Austrians, and so the Protestant side got a Catholic country because I believe it was France wanted something against Austria, so that made it no longer religious and just
mhm,
purely political. So you look at all of this divide that came out of it. There's also really good arguments that because of Catholics and Protestants having to learn how to sit together at the lunch table and not kill each other,
mhm,
um, it spawned a era of secularism that we're
mhm.
currently living in. Um, and so it's just a really there's a lot of frustrations that come from it. It makes dating for one really hard because
Yeah.
personally, I don't have an issue with a Catholic and a Protestant dating.
Mhm,
My issues come up when people get so entrenched in their um sides and it's like okay, this is more about being capital P Protestant,
mhm,
waving the flag versus capital C Catholic waving the flag,
mhm.
fighting each other than just being like I said earlier, it's like, no, I have legitimate issues. They're A, B, and C, and now let's move on with our lives.
Yeah.
So, and I had a lot of people. I've had a lot of people, both Catholics and
Mhm.
Protestants, telling me like interfaith dating is bad, and it's like, yes, there are problems with it. I'm fully
Yeah.
going to agree that there are problems with it, but I am also the product of an interfaith marriage.
Mhm.
So it's kind of hard for me to say it should never be done. And
Yeah.
I really like the fact that I didn't really grow up in an echo chamber, that I got both sides of an argument growing up.
Mhm.
And my parents were gracious enough to let me be my own person. And so I think it can be done as long as they're willing to do that. Now,
Yeah.
I'm saying this within Christianity. I don't think a Christian and like a Muslim, or a Christian
Yes.
and an atheist, should
Absolutely.
really be getting together, um because that creates its own set of problems. But I think even
Mhm.
within Christianity, I think a Catholic can date an Orthodox, and or a Catholic can date a Protestant. It just
Yeah,
needs to be
for
done
sure.
correctly.
I mean, I at one time, way back in the day, was a Jehovah's Witness dating a guy who was not particularly religious,
So
who loved God, liked to occasionally go to church with his Grammy, but other than that, wasn't particularly religious. And now we're both Christians.
yeah, so it's like you don't know where life is going to take you, and I think deciding that beforehand
Mhm.
is it's not good. It's almost, I know when people say you're playing God, it usually has to do with determining human life,
Mhm.
but I think it breaks down to, once you start deciding a future
Mhm.
that is so far in the future, it is purely hypothetical and argumentation only,
Yeah.
that when you start using that to shut down where somebody's life should go, I think
Mhm.
you kind of need to like sit back and say, okay, in the here and now, are we capable of reconciling our differences? If yes, then fine. If no, this relationship needs to end.
Yeah.
So,
That's really solid insight. I know that I have friends who have, unbelieving husbands, and I have friends who are, on the other side of that, and their husband is more religious than they are. And I know how sometimes with the head of the family not being in step, or even, a step ahead of the family religiously, how it can definitely cause issues down the line. But that also doesn't necessarily mean that every single situation, is going to be like that, or that it's not ideal, as
yeah,
long as it's within
and
the
I
Christian faith.
oh, absolutely. And I also have other friends too where it's like, no, no. I need, like, I'm Catholic, I need a Catholic husband. And I completely understand that.
Yeah.
But um it's like, I understand that when it's on a personal level, but just say, and I understand it from a general level, but once you start applying the general to individual circumstances, it's like, no, things can get messy, things, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Honestly, I felt a lot about like that way with some of the things that Pearl was saying in her Michael Knowles interview.
I haven't seen it yet, and I'm not sure if I want to, but
I've had to start and stop because of my blood pressure.
understandable. But, just to tie this back to, like,
Mhm.
why I like going to the ordinariate specifically, because I
Mhm.
mentioned the reverence, I mentioned the other stuff. The ordinariate comes out of Protestantism,
Mhm.
and so it is very much an area of where, you're not walking into a traditional Latin mass, to where it's like, "We're Catholics, we were always Catholic, you need to be Catholic."
Mhm.
It's walking into a tradition to where it's like, "Hi, I used to be Protestant. I hope you guys are willing to accept me." And you're walking into this church and everybody's like, "We all were. Join the club." So it's um like, that is something else I very much like about the Ordinariate, is hearing so many of the priests and deacons and
Mhm.
other people giving homilies, and it's like, well, I used to be Protestant, and there's just a lot more grace there, which is
Yeah.
why I feel more at home within the Ordinariate.
That's wonderful, and that's truly beautiful. I remember feeling that way when I was talking to Jeff when he was last on my show, because he had been Protestant,
Mm,
before, and now he is, he's very Catholic. He's the Supreme Pontiff Jeff.
mhm.
And yeah, so I can definitely understand that feeling, especially as someone who's had such a twisty journey.
Yeah, yeah. I really wasn't Catholic up until uh 2 years ago, like really Catholic up until
Mhm,
2 years ago. So I was never confirmed in the Catholic Church. So in the Catholic Church, you do baptism,
mhm.
uh, like first communion, and then you're confirmed. I
Mhm.
never got to the confirmation part
Okay.
because my I was in high school when I started
Mhm.
doing it, and the a lot of the people who were on my cross country team and bullying me were also in my confirmation classes.
Where are they? I just wanna talk.
Huh?
I said, "Where are they? I just wanna
Yeah,
talk."
exactly, exactly. And it was it was basically that understanding of like, wait, I won't get expelled if I beat the crap out of them at the church, and my family has some influence here, so I'm not really going to get in trouble here. And I went to, and I like I said, I hated going to those classes anyway, so
Yeah.
I told my dad, I'm like, "You're either taking me out or I'm going to put somebody in the hospital." And my dad's like, "Hmm, I understand your point. You don't have to go anymore." So
Yeah.
I'm currently going through so yeah, and then I'm going to
Mhm.
tell the story in order.
Yeah.
So then I started dating this girl.
Mhm.
She was great. She's married now. I'm sure she has a very wonderful life. I wish her nothing but the best. But she kind of hard-headed, um,
Mhm.
which was one of the things I liked about her, but that's neither here nor there. But she was kind of hard-headed, and
Mhm.
so she was constantly like, "Well, you're Catholic," and I'm like, kinda. Like, I identify more as a Protestant than hardcore Catholic, but
Mhm.
whatever. Um, and she was like, "Defend this to me. Defend this Catholic stance to me." And it's like, I don't care.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm just happy praising Jesus. I don't care if that's at a Protestant church or a Catholic church. I don't care. I'm just happy praising Jesus.
Yes.
And
Exactly that.
yeah, and she was like, "Well, you need to defend this like Catholic doctrine to me." And I'm like, "I don't want to." And she's like, "No, no, you need to. I don't feel comfortable unless you do." And it's like, "Okay, fine." I'm in college during this point too.
Yeah, like,
And I'm
respectfully turn around and watch the movie you picked, ma'am.
and so I'm in college right now. I am a
Mhm.
political science major, and that's what I got my bachelor's in.
Mhm.
So when you're asking me to do research and it's not something political, it's I know how to do that.
Yeah.
And it's not something I'm forced to be doing. So I am going full aggressive at it. And then
Yeah.
would come back and say, this is why the Catholic Church believes what it believes. And I'm sitting here, I'm like, that makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
Like I never heard it put that way before. Why did nobody tell me this growing up?
Yeah.
Like um so I was like that just happened more and
Mhm.
more and more, and two things got me to really become choose to become Catholic. The first thing was the monk that I talked about earlier was Padre
Mhm.
Pio, and hearing about him because he was a mystic. Um, Allegedly, he was able to see his guardian angel the way I'm capable of seeing you,
Wow.
and communicate with his guardian angel that clearly.
Mhm.
To the point that allegedly his guardian angel had to tell him like, no, no I think this was when he was a kid too. No, 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 no. Your friends can't see me. Nobody else can see me. Only you can see me. And Padre Pio's like, oh, but everybody has a guardian angel. And his guardian angel's like, yes. And his guardian angel's, but like, you're special. God has seen it fit that we can talk and communicate. Not everybody else's guardian angel works like that. And so Padre Pio was like, oh, okay. Thanks for
Yeah.
letting me know. So he was a mystic. Like I said, he could bilocate.
Mhm.
He had these things called the stigmata, which are the wounds of Christ,
Mhm.
which the they're the wounds of the stigmata are not historically accurate. They are
Oh.
a mysticism. So, but the wounds are real.
Mhm.
So these these wounds will either develop on your palm or on your wrist, for the very, very holy, and they are basically open wounds the way they were on Christ's resurrected body.
Mhm.
So like they're not going to get infected or anything, but they're really there. Um, and why I say they're not historically relevant is because it's to deepen the faith of the individual and all of the people around them. So the
Okay.
point is that the wounds are there, not like, oh, the wounds are in the palm or the wounds are in the wrist or
Mhm.
anywhere else.
Yeah.
The point is that they're there.
Okay.
Um so it was Padre Pio, and that's also what really got my mom into the church. And it was this contradiction from Protestants on literally reading the Bible.
Mhm.
And so you have people who say, well, I literally read the Bible, yes, mysticism is biblical. Think of people like Elijah and Elisha.
Okay.
So we're talking about that level. Um
Okay.
and so the other thing is when talking about like, well, I read the Bible literally, and it's like,
Mhm.
okay, I believe that the earth is 6,000 years old. Okay. So what about the Eucharist? Like, okay, what about it?
Mhm.
Well, Jesus says in John, you know, for I tell you, my flesh is true bread and my blood is true drink. And then, you know, at the Last Supper, he's like, behold, this is my body. Behold, this is my blood.
Mhm.
And it's like, okay, it, you, how can you tell me this is purely a symbol
Mhm.
when Jesus says that not only does he say it at one part of the Bible, he doubles down on it in another part.
Mhm.
And I think it's even in John, that in that same section where
Yeah.
everybody starts to get confused, like, dude, what are you talking about? Like, how are we going to eat your body? Like,
Yeah.
it's true bread. And Jesus, and the apostles are like, look, go and be completely honest with you. We don't understand what you're talking about either. We're just going to run with it.
Yeah, we're not cannibals or vampires. We're confused. Please stop.
Yeah, yeah. We're, d- we're just going to run with it. And Jesus is like, fair enough. That's all I ask. So, that's like one of the things to where it's like, it's just that contradiction got me of like, well, either Jesus is correct and the Catholic Church and the Orthodox and the cops are correct, like the Coptic
Mhm.
Christian, not police.
Okay.
Um, um, either the three of them are correct in
Mhm.
the whole transubstantiation thing, or like I don't know what else to tell you. Um,
Yeah.
so those were like the two things to where it's like, okay, I'm convinced Catholicism is true, and it's like, well, what about Mary? What about praying to the saints? What about like all of these other weird Catholic, um, aspects? And I'm just like,
Yeah.
I don't care. The Eucharist is true. I'm going to where people tell me that's true.
Now, does Catholicism not differentiate between prophetic gifts and mysticism? Nice pause.
Um, I don't know the answer to that. I'm sure either someone on Joe Heschmeyer or Trent Horn or especially Jimmy Akin probably has a better answer to that, but um, I have no idea. I just know that um, the modern mystics, which are
Mhm.
very rare, um, do have some of that Old Testament level prophet power to them.
Okay.
So,
Now, one of the other questions I had, I was actually asked this week because I'm kind of Catholic leaning in some
mhm.
ways, as everybody well knows. Um, what's up with Catholics keeping like skulls and such types of objects of saints or those in that kind of position and venerating them?
um, Yeah, so this is old, and,
Okay.
um, basically, I know some of it for sure has to do with the Black Death of
Mhm,
where, because during the Black Death, you know, people were dying just left and right. Everybody got very, very comfortable with death.
mhm,
And I think it even there are aspects of that that date back even before that. It's just the Black Death cemented it.
mhm.
And it's kind of just a reminder we're going to die. Um, you know, it's they're called memento moris. They're
Okay.
reminders of your mortality. Um, and it's also kind of like, hey, um, okay, the voodoo comment is actually very interesting because voodooism is Catholicism mixed with African religion, and so the um, the Africans, when they brought over on the slave ship, they
Mhm,
took the Catholicism that the Spanish and the Portuguese were teaching them,
mhm,
and they mixed it with their own religion, and so things kind of got mixed. But yeah, it's there is a veneration of basically this was a very holy person. Um, like I said, it is a very, very old practice, so it's not something
mhm.
as like 21st century Americans we're going to look at and be like, "You guys are weird," and then you go back to the Middle Ages, and it's um, like, what do you mean? Like people die, like okay, I have a skull in my back pocket. I don't see what the problem is. So it's almost just a culture clash of old, um, like Jordan Peterson says,
Mhm.
tradition is the democracy of the dead. And so when you have a religion that's been around for 2,000 years, some things get carried all the way through. So
That makes so much sense now because I did not know what to tell my friend who asked me. I was like, like, like go ask Margo or Clay or Jeff or somebody. I'm not qualified.
yeah, and there, another reason is too on like why
Mhm,
we carry these things around, is there is a belief that these objects in some way shape or form are holy, and this is
mhm,
actually biblical too, because in the book of Kings they when they're lowering a dead guy down into one of their so the Jews did graves a little bit differently.
mhm,
They dug a pit in the ground, and then they carved out shelves, and when all of those shelves were filled, then they'd completely bury it. So they're lowering this one guy in to like his specific shelf, and he touched the bones of Alicia,
mhm.
and he popped back to life. So that's like one of the thing. Yeah, that is a thing in the Bible.
Well, we're coming up on Kings in the Bible study that I'm in, so I look forward to checking that
I
out.
will try and find the exact chapter and verse for that and send it to you.
Thank
But
you. That
yeah,
yeah, that's
um,
fascinating.
um,
Okay, no, because I have a story about that, Hannah. When I was 3 years old, my Catholic grandfather and my Catholic late mother told me that if I did not clean my room by the time that my snow globe's clock got to a certain number on the hand, that the she bears were gonna come get me. And I was terrified. I damn near pissed myself. Okay? It was not a good time to be me with a messy room. Lord.
So yeah, there's that story in the Bible, and that's basically where the veneration of relics more or less comes from. And then, like I said, you old culture
Mhm,
coming through the ages to today,
mhm,
to where it's like, okay, we see this in the Bible, and then we also see this in different points throughout church history, especially in the Black Death, where everybody got really
mhm.
comfortable with death.
That makes sense.
So yeah.
I will have to look at that with my husband after the stream because there are some There's some confusions. uh, um,
I think it's in the Book of Kings. It could be in Ezekiel. So I'm, like I said earlier in the stream, I know stories in the Bible. I don't always know where. So
oh my goodness. I don't want the LGHGTV community involved. Not those kind of bears. Get your head out of the gutter. I think you broke Clay, Brendan. Dang. I have the best moderators. Oh. Oh.
okay, I'm composing
You
myself
good?
now.
You good?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Mhm.
Sweet. Now, one of my questions is with your, background and everything and your lived experiences, what
Mhm.
do you think that Christians can do to be more unified? And is
Honest,
that a goal that should anybody should be striving towards?
yes, it should. And honestly, don't start crap where it doesn't need to be started. Is what it comes down to. It's like I know somebody who gets like super offended whenever somebody mentions like, oh, such and such person prior to 1500 was Catholic, and it's like, yes, I don't know why you should be getting offended at that. Like,
Yeah, that just seems like a point, like a statement of
oh, fun
fact.
fact, Leif
Mhm.
Erikson was Catholic, so Catholics discovered America.
Catholics also helped build the railway in this country.
Mm-hmm.
My grandfather helped build South Station with his bare hands
Nice,
in Boston.
nice.
Um,
Yeah, honest, but yeah, that's what it comes down to. Is,
yeah,
is don't start crap where it doesn't have to. Like I said, if you're with all your Protestant friends and you want to celebrate Reformation Day, fine. If you're going up to a Catholic and you're purposefully telling them Happy Reformation Day just to start crap with them, that's not a very charitable mindset.
yeah, it's like wishing your English neighbor who now lives in America a happy 4th of July.
Yeah, yeah. Or even worse, being an American going to England and wishing people a happy 4th of July.
Yes, yes,
Um, so it's just one of those things of like, don't, and it says things in, it does say in the New Testament too, of if your neighbor has something that it's going to cause them to sin, and even if it's something not particularly sinful, in of itself, but like it may cause them to sin, um, like just just don't. Like
yeah,
just don't. So that is definitely something of just don't start crap where it doesn't need to be started.
yeah. I also think isn't correct me if I'm wrong in the chat, guys, or Clay, but I think that's also in the same chapter that it talks about if your brother has something against you and you go to make a sacrifice, like don't make a sacrifice, go and set things right with your brother first so that God may look favorably on the sacrifice.
Yeah, like I said, I
It's
know
all
about
it's all
things,
good.
I don't know where they are.
It's all good.
So,
But basically just, don't be causing strife within, circles of fellow believers because God doesn't
it's
like
fun.
it.
Yeah. Don't do it just because it gets your jimmies up and, "Oh, I
Exactly.
own the Catholics today." And it's like, "Dude, we were getting ice cream. You didn't
Yeah.
have to do that."
Yeah. I feel that. Now, kind of wrapping things up before we get to our Twitter questions, what was the live action Young Leader Summit like? And can you share some highlights and takeaways?
Yeah, so I was supposed to go to, that conference first, Amber Rose, the religious hippie, prayers for her dad. Her dad has, possibly brain cancer.
Yeah,
They think
I've
it's
been
brain
praying for
cancer.
her.
Yeah. Um, she was supposed to be going to this and invited out as one of the VIP people. And she's like, "Hey, I'm going to this thing. You guys should show up and meet me." And I'm like, "That's practically in my backyard." It's a county over. Um,
Mhm.
oh heck yeah, I'm going. And then I share with all my friends, and I'm like, who wants to come with me? And I'm the only person that I know who lives in Southern California, other than the Babylon Bee.
Mhm.
Um, and so my friend Mary, who's very active in the chat right now,
Welcome, Mary. I'm glad you're
was
here.
like, "Oh, I'm going to come," and I'm like, "That's awesome!" And then a week before the event, uh, Amber was or I had tweeted at Amber, because I knew I was at least going to see her on Saturday, like, "Hey,
Mhm.
I got you this magnet that's like 50% anxiety, 50% iced coffee," because Amber is an iced coffee addict. Um,
Yes.
and so I bought that, and I was going to give it to her, which I guess now I probably have to mail it to her. Um, and so uh, I she's like, "Oh my gosh, that's hilarious," I can't wait. And I asked her, I'm like, "Hey, are you going to need like a ride to from the airport or anything?" And she was like, she DM'd me and she's like, "Oh my gosh, yes, like been stressing out, I would very much like a ride." And I'm like, "Do you need a ride just for the airport or for the whole weekend?" And she was like, "For the whole weekend." So I'm like, "Cool, it's going to be me, Amber, and Mary. This is going to be a lot of fun."
Nice.
And then um Manuel
Mhm.
was like, "Oh, Trent Horn's going to be there? I'm going to be there. I'm going to come. This sounds like fun." So I'm like, "Okay, I got a little party together. This is going to be great." And then Amber's dad got sick,
Mhm.
so she canceled. Um, Manuel had a scheduling conflict that he forgot about. Thank you, Manuel. Um, and then Mary was all set to come, and I was talking to her literally the day before, and she's like, "I can't wait. I'll see you tomorrow." And then she texts me at 2 in the morning. "I have the stomach flu, and I woke up
Oof.
throwing up. I will not be coming." And I'm
Yeah.
just like, "Well, I have now I'm just going, and I have a big sports car race I could watch, or I could go to the event." And I'm like, "You know what? I think I need to go to the event. I already paid for it, and I think I need to go."
I
Um,
voted for you to go in the poll on Twitter. Full transparency.
um, I literally did not decide until I woke up. "Mary, it's fine. We can hang out later." Um, no, I'm like, "You know what? I am going to set my alarm for the time that I need to wake up, and if I just nope out of it, I can still I'm only going to be awake for an hour, and then I could just watch the race the rest of the day." Um, so I woke up and I'm like, "You know what? I'm just going to go. Um, I feel like I need to go. I need to go harass Seth Dillon." Um, so
Always a worthy cause.
yeah, so I'm going to go. So I went. It was a lot of fun. The speakers they all had were great. Um, there were no hiccups with the event. It was all very, very fun. And then we got to lunch, and because I was there by myself,
Mhm.
um, the I just found a table, and I'm like, "Is this seat open?" And people are like, "Yeah, sure." There were a lot of young Catholics at the event, which was awesome.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, I really didn't get to talk to any of them.
Aw.
Um, and so but I did talk to one guy. There were four people at the table. This uh, one girl, she was, I believe, Presbyterian, but she said that her brother or her sister was marrying a Catholic, and so she's like, "I want to know more."
Mhm.
And so we spent like a lot of the lunch period talking about Catholicism, and then there was another guy um, that we talked a little bit about Catholicism, but
Mhm.
he was just like, "I have questions I want clarified on stuff." Um, and the girl I was talking to, she was like, "No, I want to like learn more about this, like free of bias."
Mhm.
Um, like I just want to know where things stand. I'm not horribly educated on church history or anything. I just want to learn. And so I gave her a very fair, historical outlook and, why Catholics believe what they believe. And
Mhm.
then went back to the speakers. I was hoping to talk to Trent Horn, but he had a flight that he needed to catch that was like immediately after his speech. So he was like, "I'm giving
Yeah.
this speech, and then I'm doing a 10-minute Q&A, and then I need to leave." Um, and I'm just like, "Crap!" I wanted to ask him if he wanted to go to In and Out after the conference,
Yeah.
because originally, like, I was going to take Amber to In and Out because
Mhm.
she's not from California. Never been. And if you're in California, you need to go to In and Out.
Yeah. I think it's like a rule.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's like the one California rule that like has nothing to do with politics. And there's Bible verses like all over their food packaging too.
Wait, is it like a West Coast Jesus chicken?
Yes.
Lit.
It's more Jesus burger than the Jesus chicken
Well,
is.
yeah.
No, no, no. I mean there's like more Jesus. Like Chick-fil-A
Oh,
Chick-fil-A doesn't have Bible verses on their food packaging. In and
true.
Out does. And it's not obvious, but it's like on the edges of things. So like if you get your burger wrapper,
Mhm.
like where it's crimped off at the bottom, there's a Bible verse there. If you look underneath the on the rim of the
Mhm.
cups, there's a Bible verse there. It's like all over their stuff.
That's really cool.
Yeah. So uh so yeah, I was going to take her and hopefully go with Trent Horn too, but
Mhm.
like I said, none of that happened. Um
Right.
yeah, rip. Next time.
Next time, for
Mhm.
sure.
But yeah, so then the conference ended, um and Nick Freitas was there, the House delegate in Virginia who
Mhm.
does the great YouTube um shorts and always takes a sip from his mug. I actually walked up to him and I'm like, "Dude, you don't have your mug." And I think I was like maybe the second or third person to talk to him after the event.
Mhm.
And he was like, "I don't have my," and then he's like, "Oh, my mug," and he gave this like huge belly laugh, um, "Oh man, like you're the first person to like point that out." Oh, and he's like, "Yeah, yeah, you're right. I should have had them give me a mug on stage, and I could have like taken a sip from that every time I made my point." And he was totally like, "That is such a part of my media. The fact that I didn't have it, like." That was a failing, like, what the heck? So
Hurting the brand, Nick. Get it
yeah,
together.
exactly. So, he laughed about that, and I had
Mhm.
told him that, because he was talking, like, "Guys, you need to man up and, pull yourselves up by your bootstraps and, go get a job and get it together with everything." And he told a story about how one of his, producers who was my age,
Mhm.
they were 28, I'm 27, had basically told him like, "Hey, dude, you basically hit the lottery. You got out of high school, you married at 18, and then you were in the army for like 10 years. Like you had a purpose in life. Go out and hunt bad guys. We don't have any of that. Like all of that is
Yeah.
super hard and difficult, and we don't have any of that."
Yeah.
And
Purpose is so powerful.
yeah, and I heard that, and especially when Nick said, "You know what? The problem is he's right." And Nick was saying he was like at his speech, he was like, "Man, when he told me that, I was ready to throw down. I like he was pissed. What he said made me pissed,
Mhm.
and then I took a step back and I realized he was right because he was like, "We had a war going on, no shortage of masculinity there."
Mhm.
And I heard that, and it just hit like a gut check. Because that what his producer said was me.
Yeah.
And so like I went up after him and I talked to him and I'm like, I tried doing that. I tried to
Mhm.
commission into the army and it didn't work. And I've had a lot of other people tell me, didn't work with the army. You just need to go try a different branch. And Nick was like one of the few people who was like, "Hey, God told you no.
Yeah.
That's okay. He has something out there for you. Go find it."
Yeah.
And sorry, I'm getting choked up.
It's all good.
But
I know I know, probably a crumb of it, but I know that when we were scheduling this, you really were like, okay, well, we can do this if I don't deploy or like go
yeah,
end up
if I
going to
don't
boot
leave
camp.
for training, and
Yeah.
um
I know how badly you wanted that, and I know how hard it is sometimes God telling us no. But I also know what a beauty that is when we look for what that answer really is.
yeah, and I was trying to fly in the reserves after
Mhm.
that. And I was told, like, I was told you have an astigmatism. It's out, even with corrective lenses, it's outside of what the army allows. But we need pilots so bad right now. They may just let you fly anyway. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there's still a chance. And so I was going through with a lot of that. And like the my dad, being the clear voice in the room, was like, you understand this isn't a game. Like, this is your life. This is a job.
Yeah.
Like, if you were doing this full time, great, chase after it, go for it. This is a part time thing. And even as an officer, you're only going to be getting like $400 a month.
Yeah.
That's spending money. That's not, anything you can live off of,
Yeah.
especially out here.
Yeah.
And then flight pay was, I looked it up, with like $250. I'm like, that's $600. I'm going to have to be leaving multiple times a week from my full time job to
Mhm.
go and fly to get my hours. The I live between an hour and a half to 2 hours from the base I would have to be going to. I would have to find a job that was okay with me leaving all the time. Um,
Yeah, that's really hard.
yeah, and
Yeah.
my friend who was in the army, he was like, once you get the job, there's nothing they can do to keep you from leaving if you have to leave. And if they fire you, you can sue them for that. And I told them, yeah, the problem is they'd have to I would have to disclose that information first,
Yeah.
and then they would. And yeah, it may be illegal for them to fire me. It's not illegal for them to not hire me.
Yep.
Um, and so finding
Exactly.
a job would be very, very difficult, because of that, and especially like if it's in the middle of the day when I'm scheduled, that would
Yeah.
just. I'm not getting paid when I'm not at work, so
Nope.
Um, I texted my recruiter today, and I'm just like, I can't do it. As much
Yeah.
as I didn't tell him this, but it's like my own internal reasoning. As much as I would love to do this, I can't. I just
Yeah.
I economically can't. So looking for what God has for me next, but that chapter ended, and it's crushing.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah.
Yeah. That definitely is. Yeah. I was just talking with a friend today about how sometimes we can imagine our lives in such a way that we have to allow ourselves to appropriately grieve it
hmm
when that's not what our future path forward looks like.
Yeah, because my plan was, like, I got out of high school. I'm going to go to college.
Mhm.
I'm going to get my degree, and then I'm going to commission into the army, and I'm going to do that for at least 5 years,
Mhm.
and then I'm going to go on and do whatever else. Maybe I'll stay in, maybe not, but at least I'm going to use the military as a jumping off point to get my life started. That would have been a lot easier to do if I was 22.
Yeah.
But I was 26 at the time when I tried, and now I'm 27, and it's like, no, I can't drift and just have fun, and then if this doesn't work out, go back to my parents' house. Like, I'm almost 30. My I need to do something.
Yeah.
Oh,
As-
practice requires feeding of the cat.
Hi, Jess. We will get to that and welcome. Hey, wake up. You want a treat? Jazzy says thank you. Hey, say thank you. I taught you manners. Thank you.
No, Cactus, I have not talked about Chase or Bill yet.
Would you like to?
Yeah, it'll help compose myself a little bit better.
Okay.
So yeah, I just to wrap that up. Yeah, so I miss doing the military thing. I've wanted to do that my entire life, but
Mhm.
actually this will wrap right in because I graduated high school and it took me 8 years to finish college. Part of the reason is because for the first 2 years, I for the first 2 years I tried doing a mechanical engineering degree. That was a lot of math, and
Yeah.
I failed third semester chem, and I couldn't keep up with the calculus anymore. Literally calculus. Um, and so I'm like, crap, I need to find something else to do. So I spent 2 years just doing general ed, trying to, you know, see what I wanted to transfer over into. And it was like, oh, I've liked political stuff since senior year of high school. I like Ben Shapiro. I'm going to go into a political science degree because I just need my degree for the military. It doesn't really
Yeah.
matter what I get my degree in. Um, so I started doing that, and okay, this is hilarious. I had to take a family psychology class, and those tests were incredibly hard. I think the best
Yeah.
I ever did on one of those tests was like a 60%. And the majority of the class average was like 50. The professor knew that this was going to be the case, so the tests weren't weighted super heavily. And I think he had like a point stacking system, so like it wasn't like you got 0 out of 100. It was here's so many assignments. These are all worth points. There's more points than what you need for an A in the class. So you can still get your A without the exams, or at least you can
That's
still
solid.
get a B, without the exam.
Yeah. I have a double minor. One of them is psychology.
hmm
Yeah.
So, and it was the second exam we took, and I, I got, I missed one, and I was pissed that
Mhm.
I missed one. And the reason why I only missed one is because I was listening to Ben Shapiro. The test was that ideological. Yeah. So, but in that time of
Mhm.
being 8 years in college, um, I met the girl who I would end up dating for 2 years, and really forced me to look into my own tradition and heritage a bit more.
Mm.
And that kind of broke up our relationship, but it also got me to where I'm at. And through her, I was able to meet the Daily Wire guys, and through that, I got to meet Bill Whittle. Speaking of which, if anybody's a Daily Wire subscriber, and if you have not been watching Empire of Terror, I don't care how much psychological trauma it gives you, you need to go watch it because that's some important stuff.
I've
Uh,
been meaning to watch that.
it's on the Russian Revolution, and the entire first 30 minutes is about the equivalency of the death camp system in Nazi Germany, but in the Soviet Union, and
Mhm.
exactly what they did with all of the bodies, how everybody was murdered, and where they put the bodies.
Damn.
And you just stop it, and you're like, oh my gosh, that was a heavy episode. And it's like, we're only 20 minutes in, and it's like, it keeps going. Oh, crap. Um, so I've only seen the first episode, but and because I said I was going to watch it with my dad. So
Mhm.
um but yeah, no, I love Bill. Bill is a good personal friend now.
That's
Um
awesome.
yeah, and I have Bethany to thank for that. Um and yes, I did see Bill Whittle on Mike Rowe's podcast. That was fantastic. Um so yeah, I got to meet the Daily Wire guys because of that. I got to meet Bill Whittle because of that. Um I then through Twitter,
Mhm.
um because like she gave me the confidence to like start reaching out to like some of these bigger people, like
Mhm.
that it is possible to become friends with these people. um I had been interacting a little bit with Kyle Mann,
Mhm.
uh who's the editor in chief at the Babylon Bee, and um I'm like, these guys are in Southern California. If I got to meet the Daily Wire guys, I could probably find some way somehow to meet the Babylon Bee
Yeah.
guys. And then Kyle put up on Twitter one day, and he said, "Hey, does anybody want to come over to my house and play board games? My wife's out of town for the week, and I have the house to myself." Um, and he's like, "And she took the kids, so let's go." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm free." And he DM'd me, and he's like, "Where do you live?" And I'm like, "I live in this city here. I remember you guys mentioning Fallbrook in one of your videos, and I work in Fallbrook, so I figured you guys had to be close." And the
No, Kyle Man is not my husband.
no, that would be weird if you lived on one side of the country and your husband lived on the exact other side of the country.
Right? That's what I'm saying. Although
Yeah.
it's funny because whenever Clay and I hang out and he says Kyle, I'm like, oh, wait, my husband did what? He's like, no, the other Kyle.
So yeah, so he was like, um where do you live? And I said the name of my city, and he was like, "Oh, I l- I live in this city, which is the neighboring city." Um, and he's like, "You're a lot close. You're really close. Yeah, sure, man. Come over, right now, and let's play something." And I'm like, "Ah, crap! I literally just had a beer. I am not getting in a car." And he was like, bummer. We'll figure something out, and we'll play board games later. Like maybe tomorrow or later in the week." And I'm like, "Okay, cool." He ended up going to Florida to hang out with his wife and kids, so that didn't happen then. But one of the last times my ex flew out to California, we set it up with Kyle to have a game night at his house, and that happened, and that was like the first time I had actually met him.
Mhm.
And then he started up regular game nights
Mhm.
for that year, and my best friend lives right down the street from Kyle Mann.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so I told him, I'm like, "Hey, I'm um I'm going over to Kyle's house to play board games. You want to come?" And he was like, "I don't want to go all the way down to San Diego." And I'm like, "No, he doesn't live in San Diego. He lives down the street." And he was like, "Why didn't you tell me that the last time you invited me?" "Yeah, heck, man, let's go." So he's been inducted in the normal board game crew.
Nice.
Yeah, and he'll do this hilarious thing where his friends will show him Babylon Bee stuff and like
Mhm.
skits and stuff, and he'll tell them that he knows nothing about the Babylon Bee. And when Kyle pops up, he's like, "That's my buddy." And everybody will be like, "You just said you don't know anything about the Babylon Bee." And he's like, "He doesn't talk about work when we're playing board games." Which is true too. Which is he can 100% say that with complete accuracy.
That's
Um,
awesome. I love
yeah.
that.
So yeah, that's how I met Kyle Mann, and then all of this stuff is happening while I'm in college.
Mhm.
And like if God wouldn't have extended that time frame out, I wouldn't have met all of these, great wonderful people that we all like watching on YouTube.
Yeah.
So, I had mentioned Amber Rose earlier, the religious hippie. It
Mhm.
was all that confidence that got me to start reaching out to her, and um like we're starting to become friends now despite the tragedies that are happening in her
Yeah.
life. And um also, I'm being very respectful of that, but it's just a weird time to start a friendship. Um,
Yeah. I feel
but
that.
yeah, but then so at to tell about how I got to be in a Babylon Bee video.
Mhm.
So Abby Libby is friends with Seth Dillon.
Mhm.
And she told him, "Hey, I'm going to be in California. Can I go over to the office?" And he was like, "Yeah, sure." And he talked to them, and the Babylon B people got back to her and said, "Yeah, sure. We're going to be shooting a video. We can use you guys as extras."
Mhm.
And Abby was like, "Awesome. This is great." And so then I found out that when they were at CPAC,
Mhm.
um, that I'm like, "Wait, you're in California and you didn't tell me?" And she was like, "We're in Palm Springs and that's like 2 hours away from you. We didn't want you to drive all the way out here." And I'm like, "Okay, rule about California. You wanna go anywhere, you need to drive. 2 hours is nothing, and my family likes to travel too, so 2 hours is really nothing for me. I go to Palm Springs all the time just to, walk around the air museum there for 2 hours and then go home. Like, it's not that bad." And she was like, "Oh, um, well, now I know, so the next time I'm out, we can, hang out." And I'm like, "Okay." And she's like, "Also, I'm going to the Babylon Bee office tomorrow, and I'm going to, be in a video." And I'm like, "Oh, that's so cool." And I'm like, um, "Man, I wish you could have asked if I could have come." And I'm like, "Wait a minute, I know Kyle." And I'm
Yeah.
like, I told and Abby's like, "Yeah, I don't think they would be okay with me just bringing a tag along without telling them." And I'm like, "I know Kyle. I'm just going to text him and ask him if I can come along." And she was like, "Well, I don't want to get in trouble and have him get mad at me, for you finding out. I don't know how hush hush this is supposed to be." And I'm like, "I just bought Kyle and his family pie like yesterday. He can't get mad at me." Um, we have this little mountain town called Julian, and
Mhm.
it used to be a gold mining town, but it's
Mhm.
also really good for planting apples. So they have like the best apple pie and like other
That's
pie
awesome.
stuff. So
Mhm.
whenever I go down, I just text Kyle. I'm like, "You want a pie?" And he's always
That's
like,
awesome.
"Yeah, sure, man."
That's
Uh,
how it used to be with PJ and me getting his wife gluten-free brownies.
so so I had just gotten Kyle a pie, and I'm like, he's not allowed to get mad at me. Um, and because I bring him pies, his wife loves me. So
Nice.
um I text Kyle. I'm like, "I just found out Abby Libby is, coming to this. Can I come to the office too?" And Kyle's like, "Yeah, sure, man. Come on by." Mind you, I had been going over to Kyle Mann's house for
Mhm.
like a year at this point, and I had not once been to the office. um so
I feel like that kinda shows that you're a good friend because 'cause you're not just like, "Okay, take me when you work, take me when you work."
yeah, it's like, no, like, I'm here to play board games. Like, I don't like the Babylon Bee stuff is cool, and that's why I reached out. But I'm here to play board games with the Babylon Bee guys.
Mhm.
Um, so he was like, "Yeah, sure, man. Come on by. Here's the address." Um, and so I show up. I actually beat Abby Libby there.
Checks
And
out.
yeah, and I saw Chandler, who was in the California to Texas videos that they did,
Mhm.
um, standing outside, and she was on a phone call. And then Abby pulls in, and Chandler sees them and is like, "Oh, hi." And I walk up, and she's kind of like, "Who's this guy?" And Abby's like, "This is our friend Clay." And so we get into the office, and Chandler and their the
Mhm.
Babylon Bees PR rep, Ryan, they both have this attitude of like, "Hey guys, it's so great that you could come. We really wish you would have told us you were bringing a third person and not just had him show up. Um, but he's here now. We're not going to turn him away. Like,
Mhm.
okay, like, we're going to forgive it this time, but you guys really should have told us." That was like the total attitude
Mhm.
they had of like as soon as I walked in. And then things got funny because we had to sign some like release paperwork to be in the video,
Mhm.
and we walked in, and Abby and Chandler's like, "Hi, everybody. This is Abby. This is PJ. Say hi. Oh, and then this is Clay." And so so everybody around this room says hi, hi, hi.
Mhm.
And then Brandon, who's the Asian guy in the videos,
Oh, okay,
he,
okay.
he goes to Kyle's house for game night. So I know Brandon,
Mhm,
and I know him know him decently well.
mhm.
And Brandon's like, "Hi, nice to meet you. Hi, nice to meet you. Hi, nice to." And then he turns to greet me, and he's like, "Clay, what are you doing here?" And I'm like, "I heard they were coming to the office, and I wanted to come. So
Mhm,
I asked Kyle and I came." And Brandon's just like, "Oh, okay." Um, and then Dan Coates walks out, and Chandler's like, "This is Abby, this is PJ, and this is Clay." And Abby and Dan's like, "Hi, nice to meet you. Hi, nice to meet you. We've met before, haven't we?" And I'm like, "Yeah, once or twice." And he's like, "Oh, okay. I thought so." Um, and suddenly Abby and PJ and the other half of the office are like, "Who the heck is this guy? Like, what's going on?" And one of the other guys in the office is like, "Were you at Kyle's son's birthday last Saturday?" And I'm like, "Yeah. Yeah, I showed up kind of late." And he was like, "Oh, I know. I have a terrible habit of saying, I'm sorry. I don't do a lot of public speaking."
Be nice to my guests, or I will come to your house and bite you.
So he looks at me and he's like, "We've, I saw you as you were leaving, or as I was leaving Kyle's house and you were walking up." He's like, "Okay, I've met you before." And I'm like, "Oh, apparently we have met." So we're going to go do the filming thing, and the, gosh dang, I'm super self conscious about that now.
Damn, Seder.
So Abby and PJ walk up to me
Mhm.
and they're like, "Clay, how the heck do you know half of the people in the office already?" I'm like, "Because I go to game night with Kyle." And they're like, "Yeah, but we thought that was just like you and Kyle." I'm like, "No, like, all these guys show up too, and then several of Kyle's friends as well." And they're like, "Oh, okay. I kid you not. They are wa- they finish. They are
Mhm.
walking away from me, and I turn around, and uh Dan, Brandon, and the other guy who was in the video, Travis, the three of them are walking up to me as Abby and PJ are walking away. And so it's like utter whiplash. And they walk up and they're like, "Clay, who are these people? Like, we know you."
Mhm.
And we have like two random people from Twitter in the office. Um, and I'm like, "No, no, no. I know them. I've met Abby before. Uh, she's cool. I haven't met PJ, but Abby's cool. You're not gonna have any issues." And they're like, "Okay, cool. Thanks for letting us know." And after that, the whole dynamic between everybody was just smooth as butter. It wasn't we're
Nice.
entertaining two random people, who know Seth and kind of got their way into the office.
Mhm.
Now we're like, these are Clay's friends, and so we can deal with them. So it made everything go so much smoother.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then we shoot the video and we walk out, and Chandler, who was, one of the two people
Mhm.
who had this like, "Great, we have a third person that wasn't invited."
Yeah, she was Abby Libby's date to the, Lady Ballers premiere. I actually dressed Abby for that event. That was my cape that she was wearing.
That's awesome. I wish I could have gone to that, but it was so last minute that
Yeah.
being in Southern California, it was like, that's $1,000 to stay for the week, and it's $1,000 for the plane ride. And
Yeah,
I'm
I
like,
know you weren't the only one that had tricky like, that was those logistics were tricky for.
yeah, so I just couldn't go. But Chandler walks out and she's like staring me down, and she's like, "How do you know Kyle?" And because Kyle wasn't there when we initially got to the office. He showed up halfway through filming, and so while we were filming, he walked into the room, and they were like, "Hi, this is," they're like, "Hey, this is Abby, this is PJ, um, this is Kyle," and
Mhm.
introduced them. And Kyle just sees me and he gives me a fist bump, like, "Hey, man, how's it going?" Um, so um, I don't know what happened. I could only imagine that Chandler told Kyle, "Hey, they brought a third person,"
Mhm.
and Kyle must have been like, "Yeah, I know. Clay texted me asking if he could come," and Kyle's response always is like, "Oh yeah, he comes over to my house and he plays board games sometimes." Um, and I know that's exactly what he told Chandler because she was like, "How do you know Kyle?" And I'm like, "Oh, Twitter. I go over to his house and I play board games sometimes." And she's like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah. I know all of that. How? How did this happen?" So I told her the story that I told earlier about,
Yeah.
Twitter, and she was just like, "I'm going to find Kyle and I'm going to kill him. You're inviting strangers over to your house? Like your private house of just random people you meet on Twitter? Like what the heck is wrong with you?" And she went into this mini rant about that. And she's like, "I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm a woman and just inviting random people off
Probably.
the internet, just makes me upset." And Kyle's like, "I've done it with other people before, Clay. It's worked out so far."
Yeah. I mean, I have friends on Twitter that I literally send, like, birthday gifts to in
Yeah.
the mail.
Yeah, so it's just one of those things. It was funny
Yeah.
too because when I went to Kyle's son's birthday party, I met Kyle's mom, and she's
Aw.
a wonderful person. And I walked up and I'm like, "Hi, I'm one of Kyle's friends." And I was talking to her later that night and she's like, "You look so young. I thought you were one of their older son's friends. And then you said you were Kyle's." And I was just like, "Well, he's always had an eclectic mix of friends." And
Yeah.
she's like, "But you're like what, 16?" And I'm like, "No, 10 years older. I'm 26." And she's just like, "Oh, oh, you being Kyle's friend makes a lot more sense now." So, that's the story of going to the office and being in the video. And so when I met Seth this weekend, I walked
Mhm.
up to him and I'm like, "Hi, I'm Clay." And he's like, "Hi, Clay, nice to meet you." I'm like, "Hi, we have a mutual friend." And he's like, "Really? Who?" And I'm like, "It's Kyle." And he's like, "Kyle? Ky- Kyle Mann?" And I'm like, "Yeah. I go over to his house sometimes and we play board games." And he's just like, "Huh. Okay, that's cool." And I had seen Kyle the day before because I had another pie to drop off to him.
Mhm.
I bought pies on
Naturally.
Pie Day, and I asked him if he wanted one. So
I
Um,
literally tried to do a roundup of pies for Pie Day and the American Daily Press, and people wouldn't give me the recipes, and I was like, "Fine, I'll
yeah,
just do my own pie."
I went out
Rude.
and I bought pie. Um, and I got Kyle pie. Um, and so
Pile
I was
pie.
talking to Kyle. I'm like, "Yeah, there's this conference thing that apparently Seth is going to be at." And Kyle's like, "Oh yeah, yeah. I actually had a call with him earlier today. I told him to look out for you." So I can only imagine when I walked up to him, I said, "Hey, my mutual friend is Kyle."
Mhm.
Seth must have been like, "Is this the guy? Like, wait, really?" Oh, and then talked to him a little bit, and so it was um I told him, I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'm friends with Abby," and he's like, "Oh man, Abby's great." Um, so yeah, that's how that whole Babylon Bee story ties together.
Nice. Thank you so much
Um,
for sharing that.
you're welcome. Sorry it went a little long, but
It's all good.
yeah.
There are just a couple more questions that I wanted to get to. And these ones are specifically Twitter questions.
Okay.
Back in on the app formerly known as Twitter. So one of these questions was, which MOTA is better? MOTA.
Yeah. So Masters of the Air has the same acronym as Mass of the Ages. So I started tweeting out Masters of the Era's moda specifically to harass Margot.
Nice.
Um, because Margot's really fun, and especially like to get her goat on things is really really fun. Um,
My husband loves to do it, and I think she doesn't understand half the time that Kyle literally loves her. Like he loves all of my guests, and he's like bullying her or something, and I'm like, no, he's
I
teasing
I
you.
met Margot like a year and a half ago, um, and she's great. Um, so there's a series called Mass of the Ages, which goes through the Latin Mass. I am a bad Catholic. I haven't seen a single episode. And the other moda is Masters of the Air, which is the third series in Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg's World War II, Band of Brothers, The Pacific, and now Masters of the Air.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Because I saw
so
Band of Brothers.
yeah, Band of Brothers is fantastic. The Pacific was good. I actually it took me a long time to finish it because it's a completely different mode of storytelling, and
Hmm.
so it's kind of hard to get into if you've seen one. Like I've
Hmm.
literally talked to people who seen the Pacific first and they didn't like Band of Brothers and vice versa. Um, and then I like literally people, and I am one of them, were waiting for Masters of the Air for over 10 years. Um, and it finally came out and it had very mixed reviews because part of it was the hype
Hmm.
had been there for so long that it needed to be absolutely perfect, and after something's hyped up for so long,
Yep.
it's impossible to meet those standards.
Yeah, for sure.
Another problem with Masters of the Air is that the book is not a narrative book. um the book doesn't take a specific group of guys and follow them throughout their story the way that Band of Brothers does. It takes a look at the 8th Air Force as a whole, and when it needs to zoom in on very specific individuals, it focuses on the 100th. But so they use that book and a book by the lead navigator, Harry Crosby, and so they took more of a view of trying to tell the whole story of what it was like to be in the Air Force during World War II
Hmm.
than just telling the story of the 100th Bomb Group. So they changed some stuff here and there. So it's technically the least historically accurate of the three,
Hmm.
but they're trying to show you what life was like and why people
Okay.
did certain things rather than making sure that all of the individual details were on point of what they were historically.
Okay.
Yeah, so but no, I thor I knew that going in.
Hmm.
So I thoroughly enjoyed the series. The CGI was a little clunky, but
Hmm.
whatever. Um,
Okay, that's good
but
to know.
to answer the question of which one is better, I have only seen one of them, and given the fact that I'm such a World War II nut, um, I'm going to go with Masters of the Air. Like if anybody's seen the series, and the long coats that uh Buck and Bucky are wearing at the end of the series, I am currently wearing one of those right now. And just off to my shelf, I have a flight helmet and goggles from World War II that are authentic.
I'm trying
So,
so hard not to pressure you to stand up and spin right now.
so this is like an actual long coat, so it goes all the
That's
way down to my
amazing.
ankles.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it is
I
great.
love that this actually gets into the second question. How did you curate such a unique and handsome style? Because what I love about your wardrobe specifically is that it doesn't feel like it was just picked and put on, like, just picking up something like random. Like you actually like look really spiffy in it, and it's very like well curated.
Yeah, I got my mom's fashion senses. What I have to say. My dad has absolutely zero fashion sense, and my mom is definitely one of those people who's like, you know I very much know how fashion works, and I
Mhm.
really like that. And I also just from my own little studies here and there, um I know that a lot of men's fashion comes from the military,
Mhm.
and so I've been able to trace back where a lot of men's fashion comes from to the
Mhm.
garments that they were initially came from. And so I'm a nerd, and because I'm a nerd, I'm like, well, I'm not buying this bomber jacket inspired thing. I'm
Mhm.
buying the original thing that inspired everything. So, um, yeah,
Honestly, you're cool as heck.
thank you. So, yeah, I live in California, so a t-shirt and jeans goes with everything, and then it's like, oh, if I need a collared shirt, then I can put a collared shirt on, and I like dressing up.
Mhm.
I like wearing suits. I spent $250 on a Stetson fedora. um,
That actually gets into the next question. What are your best tips for finding a good hat?
yeah. So it depends what you want it for. Um, I'm going to guess that question came from Laurel. I don't know if it's accurate or not, but that sounds like such a Laurel question. Um, but so what do you want it for? Is it just casual? Do you need to wear it with a suit? Like what is it for? It has to match the outfit.
Mhm.
So like there's like flat news boy caps that if my door was I have my door open all the time. I only ever close it for podcasts. So like
Mhm.
my hat rack is on the outside of my door for like all of my caps, my ball
Mhm.
caps, which are all NASCAR related. Um but so it's like, is it going to be casual? Like, well, there's some nice hats that, like a newsboy cap that can be casual and, you can wear with a suit. Is it just for ball caps?
Mhm.
Are you wearing it just with like a t-shirt and jeans? That's fine. Um, okay, if it's a dressy hat, like, okay, go find, you know, a fedora, go find something like this. I think the website's called The Art of Manliness.
Mhm.
Um, has a bunch of articles on this, on like when something is supposed to be worn, how is it supposed to be worn,
Okay.
so on and so forth. And then just looking at old, like older eras in Americana of like when, where, how. So
Mhm. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for sharing that resource.
you're welcome.
Now, this one keeps being asked in the chat, so I'm finally getting to your question. Would you rather find a good stick or throw a rock into a body of water?
Throw a rock into a body of water. I I don't like carrying things unless I have to. Um, so, but I do like watching things explode, and throwing a rock into a body of water is a form of explosion. And I have literally just gone onto YouTube and watched people take bricks of sodium, like
Mhm.
pure elemental sodium, and throw it into water, because not only do you get the splash, but you
Mhm.
also get the explosion. So, rock.
Okay. Makes sense. Susie Q in the chat says rock. Answered Satyr says stick. But this has been Finding the Faith. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us, Clay, and for spending this time with me. It's been really great.
You're welcome. It's been an honor.
The honor's been mine, I assure you. Would you like to close it out in prayer?
Yes. In the name of the Father, and Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Father God, thank you for this event. Thank you for this day. Thank you for all of the people that you've brought into our lives. God, we don't always know why you do what you do, but we just ask that we maintain a strong faith and we continue with on the path that you have set before us. Help guide us to where we get lost and keep us going to where we need to go. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. God, also pray for all of our friends who are going through health issues right now, especially Abby Kaiser's husband and Amber Rose's dad. May you be with them and keep them and all those safe, and all those too, like our friend Claire, uh, whose uncle has been wrongfully imprisoned. Give all of them the strength to get through the day. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. That was a beautiful prayer. Thank you so much.
You are very welcome.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and I will see you guys next week. On Monday, we will be doing in the Discord a very special game night, a community appreciation event, because we are almost at a year, and what makes this community a community is all of you guys. And that's why at 8 o'clock next Monday, we will be playing a bunch of Jackbox games. It's going to be a blast. And then on Tuesday, I will actually be having a panel with Jess, Sam, Emily Zanotti, and Katie Faust. So that will all be about IVF, and I know it's going to be a crucial conversation. So I look forward to seeing you next week. And everybody, take care, stay based, stay blessed.